Let's kick off this telecast, which we do in partnership with Businessworld. Joining us on the broadcast, we have Kachru. He is VP of the Hotel Association of India and Chairman Emeritus and Principal Advisor South Asia of the Radisson Hotel Group. Mandeep S. Lamba, he is President of HVS Anarock. Sanjay Sethi, MD and CEO of Chalet Hotels, is back with us on NewsX. Nikhil Sharma, who is Regional Director of Eurasia, Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Bhuvanesh, Khanna, who is the CEO of BW Communities at Businessworld. And as always, Dr. Annurag Batra, Chairman and Editor-Chief of Businessworld, is joining us. I'm having my colleague Gauri Kondalia sit in on the conversation as well. Welcome to all of you. Annurag ji, as always, why don't you kick this off for us?
We have the stalwarts of the hospitality industry here. These are people who in some way lead the hospitality industry. And hospitality industry is one of those industries, contact industries, that got impacted most. So when we talk of green shoots of the economy, I think the gentlemen on the show today are in a good position to tell us how big are those green shoots. Are there really green shoots? It's also an industry that really didn't get any kind of benefit from the government. It did not get any relief from the government. So with the budget around the corner, what are the expectations they have from the finance minister? So to address this, let me start first with Mr. Kachru. Mr. Kachru, you both as the Chairman Emeritus of the Radisson Group in India, as well as in your position at the Hotel Industry Association. First of all, are there green shoots in the economy that are visible through the numbers in the hospitality industry, or the hospitality industry is in still very deep crisis?
Thanks, Annurag. Thanks, first of all, for having all of us here. Today is a good day, and I think while you are talking about green shoots, I think it was wonderful to have India win over Australia, and we made it. And I think we can learn a lot from our team when most of our members were injured, and despite that, they pulled it off. So we are almost in a situation like that. First of all, I think we have to acknowledge fully that we are important. Our industry is important, and we're grateful to our Prime Minister, who acknowledged that we are one of the 5 pillars of the economy. And as you correctly said, we didn't get much relief till now. And we have to actually showcase what we are, what we need, and what we need to do now as the community and as an industry. I mean, Annurag, we contribute almost 10% of the GDP to the economy, and our employment is again 9 to 10%. So we need some attention, and we are, while all this has happened, I think it's very important to note that we need to cash on where we are. We see very positive trends in the leisure traffic, and there should be a lot of focus on domestic tourism. I think we have to acknowledge that in the next year or so, we cannot depend much on international travel. International travel is almost zero, if I may say, in terms of business and MICE. I think the real issue is domestic tourism, and we are definitely, Annurag, seeing green shoots, and particularly any drivable distance, people are traveling, and hotels, the whole travel circuit is doing well. You have seen what has happened in Kashmir in the last 2 months. Despite all the problems, that has done well. Himachal has done well. Uttarakhand has done well. We have Goa, which is actually doing much better rates than they expected in this particular last quarter. Yeah, and I think these are the areas we need to focus on. If we have to save jobs, I mean, there are about, as I have been talking, over 100 million jobs in our industry, and sad to say that we have already almost about 30 to 35% job losses in the industry. So we need to really focus on that.
Okay, Mr. Kachru, I'll come back to you in terms of what are the specific expectations from the government and in the budget. But let me go to Sanjay. Sanjay, you operate a large group and you can see the numbers happening. Do you support Mr. Kachru's view that the green shoots are visible and they're big enough to be able to, in some way, take you to safer numbers which will possibly help you stay afloat and help you thrive? Or do you see that this environment, which is gloomy in terms of occupancies, in terms of F&B revenues, will continue for another 6 to 12 months till we fully take care of COVID?
So Annurag, I agree with everything that KB said earlier. Let me put it this way. I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, but there's still a distance to be traveled to get to the end of the tunnel, right? And it's not going to be an easy and quick journey. It's going to take time. Like Mr. Kachru said, we've seen drivable distance leisure pick up very well in the last few months. We've, at our end, also seen project-based business travel come back fairly strongly. We've seen city-based staycation experiences become very trendy. And therefore, a new segment and product development is happening in the industry. And this will evolve for good. So, we'll basically come out of COVID with an added segment or added revenue streams, all the better from pre-COVID times. Do we need help? Absolutely. I think as an industry, but the reason that we need help is the following. Number one, we've contributed amongst the largest jobs in the country today. 1 in 12 jobs come from hospitality and tourism. We are a large contributor to the Indians' GDP and as well as the foreign exchange earnings. And we are the hardest hit industry. I think it's very important that the government take notice of this and do what they can to help us tide over this period, conserve jobs, contribute to the GDP, and bring in foreign exchange earnings.
Okay, Sanjay. And Sanjay, in terms of asks from the government, what are the specifics asks that the Finance Ministry and the Government of India can do to be able to help both the hotel owners, which is the property owners, and the operators?
Yeah, so at this point in time, I largely wear an owner's hat, hotel owner's hat. And I think a couple of things that are critical for the industry perspective is to ensure that we generate investment. We create investment, and investment will then create jobs and contribute to the GDP and the foreign exchange earnings. So from our perspective, I would say that the government must give 125% of all investment as capital right back in our books, which allows us to take a hit in year one itself. Also, the government should allow land as a part of that capex investment, because land is a large component of capital investment in our business. Then we need some help on the direct and indirect taxes. We need help on the foreign trade policies, for example, SEIS, which is a key thorn in the industry's area right now, both from travel as well as from hospitality. We need 10% quota back for SEIS benefit and spread over a certain period of time. The final thing I think the industry needs is the ability to write back or to carry forward losses over a 12-year period. Currently, it's an 8-year period, because we're going to be, having a longish downside to the cycle for the industry. It's important that we are able to take the benefit of carry forward of losses over a longer period of time.
Thank you, Sanjay, for being specific. I would add one more, restructuring of the loans to the hospitality sector and maybe doing some special reduction on rates on those just for this sector, because again, the hospitality sector exposure is huge. So that's one more demand I'll add on behalf of your
Absolutely. I missed
set of owners. Mandeep, you heard Mr. Kachru, you heard Sanjay. What do you think that the government can do in terms of helping the industry?
I think between Sanjay and you, Annurag, you've covered most of the significant points. But just to add, I think there have been two typical pain points that we've been talking about for a very, very long time. And those are pending demands for the industry, which keep coming up in every forum, in every white paper that is written. One is, of course, the industry status, which, like the government of Maharashtra has done, which has been such a wonderful step for the hotels in Maharashtra. I think it needs to be done at a national level. I think there has been debates about tourism being on the concurrent list. Be that as it may, I do think that we need to get the industry status that helps in reducing our costs. It helps in making the business more viable and more profitable. And that is a long-standing demand that we've been seeking. I think there is so much tourism potential in this country that it actually would be simply wonderful if the government considered this and gave the industry this privilege. It would change things considerably. That's one. And the second thing, which has again been a very long-standing demand, is to get infrastructure lending status with the RBI, which we are a very capital-intensive industry, as everybody knows, and the cost of capital often becomes the big issue. So if we could get infrastructure status, which allows a much larger repayment period and more attractive rates of interest, that in itself would be a huge fillip for the industry. And what Sanjay was talking about bringing investment into the industry. These two things, amongst the many that you've spoken about, are very critical. And if I may add smaller things, like probably extending the EPCG guarantees, because the foreign earnings are not going to happen because of the restrictive foreign movement into the country. So we will need an extension, for hotels to be able to earn the foreign exchange which they've committed for the EPCG. That is something that I think the government should do. And lastly, if I may add, is the ability for hotels to bill on IGST for corporates for the MICE business. I think that's very, very helpful for the industry, specifically now when travel is going to be restricted within the country and there could be a lot of MICE opportunities. If the government allowed this, that would again bring a lot of cheer to the industry. So I think these are some of the things that I would like to state. Just quickly, Annurag, on the leisure travel, which you mentioned in the beginning, and which Mr. Kachru and Sanjay mentioned. So there is no doubt that leisure travel has really taken fancy. Everyone is traveling, I think, simply out of fatigue, and we're seeing a lot of business coming into leisure locations. But the trouble with the Indian hospitality industry in the current context is that our leisure markets are greatly underserved. The inventories in these markets are very small compared to the large inventory we have in our cities. And the big money is the cash cows for most of the hotel owners come from the cities. And that is where the problem lies, that corporate movement is very slow. International travel or inbound travel is going to continue to be slow.
And some of the major brands are missing from that service offering. If you take certain market, there is a certain experience even Indian travelers seek that may be missing. So clearly on the supply side, at some stage we need to beef that up. Let me go to Nikhil at this point. Nikhil, we are on 20th January. Tomorrow is 20th January. The budget is due in about 12 days. And over the last 3 months, the GST collections have been record GST collections. Now, does it reflect this kind of optimism, buoyancy, reflect in the numbers you've seen in your hotel operations, or do you see it as a temporary phenomena that may not last very long because it was a wedding season, it was Diwali, it was IPL, and there was some pent-up demand which kind of was catered up to, but maybe it may not last long enough. Give us a sense of what you see in your hotels.
Anurag, firstly, thank you for having me and taking a lead from what Mr. Kachru said. Both Rishabh and I are actually cohorts of Australia-India Youth Dialogue, and today has been a very, very special day for us. I know my WhatsApp's been buzzing with all the Australian counterparts actually congratulating us. And one thing that the Australian coach said is never give up on Indians, and I think that's really the sentiment. That's the sentiment for business, that's the sentiment for sports. Week on week, we have seen occupancies in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities rise. Yes, social has been the mainstay, but in the last few weeks, we are seeing SMEs, MSMEs who are traveling. The large corporates still continue to have travel bans or freeze or limited travel. And that is where, like Mandeep was saying, is the issue. But as Sanjay said, staycations is taking off. A new segment of people actually who weren't doing social are actually now coming to hotels and doing small events, whether it's in the restaurants, whether it's banqueting, and small is beautiful at the moment. I do see this trend continuing, and I see hotels filling up faster than what at least some of us were thinking a few months ago.
Okay, that's good news. Let me bring in Mr. Bhuvanesh Khanna. Mr. Khanna, as BW hotelier, when you look at the industry, where do you think it is headed? And quickly, what between Mandeep and Sanjay, they've already outlined what is needed from the government and from the finance minister. But what do you think are the silver linings? Like, Nikhil has talked about, this new Indian traveler that wants to drive to a close by location, and that is increasing. Stay vacations are increasing, and there may be other positive trends. So are there any silver linings in this very dark cloud otherwise? Mr. Khanna?
I think the dark clouds are gone, right? So one is not just seeing shoots. Let me tell you, I was last week, I think last Tuesday, I was out for a meeting at the Aero City, right? And I asked the gentleman, the CXO of a very tall international brand in India. And I asked him, I said, there's so many people here, what's happening? And he opened the door to the conference room, meeting going on. There was a corporate meeting going on. And he says, for the next 17 days, we are booked every day for MICE meetings. So if that is not encouraging, what is? And on the flip side, if that is about MICE, about travelers, I mean, we all have social circles, right? I have my ears up and about. I have friends, I have family. In fact, right now as I speak, my sister is on a holiday for 7 days in Goa at one of the most premier brands, right? I have friends, they're all traveling, right? I think business is happening, and India will pick up faster than other locations. We've got our act together. Our hoteliers have got their act together. They've not been sitting, they've been planning while the lockdown was on. Each one of them, they've got their act together. The people are up and about. So innovation and the want to succeed, I think, have shown good results.
But absolutely right. And clearly, I have a friend who tried to book one of the premium properties of a leading chain close by to Gurgaon, and nothing was available. It sold out on the weekend. As it's a long weekend, it extends into the
Anurag, if I may add,
yes.
The challenge is not the occupancy, right? Like Mandeep was saying, the cities have got a large amount of inventory. The upcountry hotels, the staycations, like Sanjay was saying, the occupancies are very high. I think the industry's challenge is ARR, which for the uninitiated is the average room rent, right? So that is where the challenge is, the yield, as we say in advertising. So which is what they want to pull up.
I want to give you just an example. In the hospitality industry, but in Bangalore, I was in a hotel on Sunday, and you're right, I went for a physical event, my first physical event in 10 months, and it was a 250, 300 seater banquet hall. 185 people were actually seated. in the restaurant, there was no space to. Of course, there were social distancing norms that were being followed. The hotel professionals and colleagues were very proactive in making sure that they reminded everyone to wear the mask, and all the sanitation protocols were in place. So clearly, the green shoots are visible. Physical events have started, but very importantly, this industry has tried to innovate, and the ARR is also rising. This particular hotel that I was staying is typically at about 9,000 rupees for a base room, and it had gone down to about 3,000 rupees in December. Just because they were trying to attract people. It is back to about 6,500. So clearly, and it's a premium hotel, one of the homegrown premium chains in India, and really that tells you that the ARRs possibly move up as the occupancies increase, the business travel comes back to some semblance of normal. At least for the next 18 months, I don't see business travel coming back to its pre-COVID levels, because a lot of us have learned to do a lot of things, virtually, and there is also still a fear factor. So I'd say that ARRs will improve, they'll get better. But just before we take a break, let me bring in Mr. Kachru. Mr. Kachru, you've seen many cycles in the economy. You've seen, dips. This was unusual. This was literally catastrophic. Now, as we go into 2021, as a hospitality leader, what do you think is the mindset change required to survive in this new normal or new abnormal, whatever you want to call it? As a hotel leader, what is the change in your mindset you need to do? What is the change in your wiring you need to do, if at all that change is possible?
Annurag very correctly said it was unpredictable, and nobody expected it, nobody wanted it, it happened. I think the dynamics of the entire business have changed, and everybody has to tune themselves to the new normal, and we have to accept that things have changed and we need to change accordingly. And whether they are hotels, the transport companies, the aviation sector, I think we collectively need to see what needs to be prioritized. And I do see, lot will fall off. It's going to happen. I think we have to be ready to acknowledge things, as I said in my initial opening, that the problem is we as an industry have to accept what has happened, and most of us have accepted it and are moving accordingly. I think a lot of good things have also happened, Annurag. We have addressed issues on lot of wasteful expenditure. We have restructured operations. Almost every hotel company, operator or owners have had a relook at what they are doing. And you'll be surprised that without reducing the brand specs or the level of operations, we are able to actually look at things more minutely and positively and give better yield to our ownerships. People are investing in us, and when they are investing in us, we have to worry about the ROI, which we are supposed to give it to them. So I think, we need to be ready for that. And yes, the mindset has changed. We have to change accordingly. And we are doing that.
Absolutely. And I would say less is more. And for the first time, every professional, whether a hotelier or in any other profession, has learned not to say never, never say never, and question every part of the business drivers and see what is essential and what is not. Just before we break, I want to bring in Nikhil. Nikhil, again, there are some short-term challenges the industry has, there's some medium term and there's long term. In the short term, it is, as Mr. Khanna said, it is the ARR, it is getting occupancies up. F&B revenues are down in most hotels, which was also a very large part of the revenues, and they contributed to profitability. Do you think in the next few months we will see people starting to come out to dine, MICE going back, and hence the F&B revenues going up? Do you see that happening with the rising occupancies, or do you think it's 6 months away?
Annurag, I think it's already happening because all brands, all hotels have gone out with their cleanliness campaigns, and today it's a cleanliness theater really. It's more visual, right? So people are more they feel safe when they're going to a hotel. We are seeing that with the social segment. We are seeing that with more people coming out, and like Mr. Kachru said, change is the only constant. Hotels have adapted. Hotels that were actually not doing delivery have started delivery to ramp up, and every hotel of any value is actually doing their own delivery or has a tie-up with a Swiggy, Zomato equivalent. The question of are people coming back to restaurants? Yes, they are. Of course, the numbers aren't as great as they should be, but the road to recovery on this seems to be a lot shorter than the ARRs.
Okay. Gauri, would you like to take a break now, or would you like to ask?
We still have a bit of time, Annurag. We will take a break in a bit. You can continue with one more question.
Let me bring in Sanjay again. Sanjay, again, any economy is sustained through two things: investment and demand. And again, while you need to be very conscious of today, you also need to build for future. You rightly ask for those incentives which help you build investments for future. Mandeep talked about the supply in certain cities beyond metros, which is non-existent for large brands, and that's where demand is. So tell us, as a leading operator, owner, you're an owner, you wear the owner's hat, but what is your outlook when it comes to investing in new hotels? Because the land prices may be more attractive, the project management may be more, let's say, cost effective. There may not be project overruns. The government may also be proactive in terms of giving sanctions to new property. So are you still aggressively looking at increasing your portfolio while you deal with some short-term issues?
So Annurag, look, we had a pipeline of hotels that were under development, and Chalet also has some non-hotel assets in its portfolio. We've restarted some of that work. So clearly we are putting capex in to develop more assets, both hospitality and non-hospitality. It's a catch-22 situation because today, because of the situation that's been created out of COVID, there are so many assets in the market available below replacement costs. So the question there is, am I going to spend 3-4 years building a hotel today, or should we be picking up hotels from the market? That's the key question, and that's probably what is keeping us awake most of the time. And when you have good assets available below replacement costs, you'd rather quickly acquire them, turn them around over the next year or so, and have them in play. But we'll continue to invest either ways, either through acquisitions or through development. From a supply-demand situation, obviously we'll see slowdown on the supply side. Demand's being challenged in this last year. Supply, which was already at a low 4.5-5% year-on-year for the next 5 years, is probably going to shrink to 2.5-3% year-on-year for the next few years, because it takes time to build hotels out. So supply side is the positive side of the story. So whatever existing hotels are there will be able to pick off the same pie with a smaller supply side. But I think overall I see business coming back, business travel, especially business travel from the second and third quarter of the next financial year. My belief is that from October onwards, we should see a significant traction. We're already seeing green shoots of individual business travelers in our hotels. We are seeing more than green shoots of project-based business travel happening in our hotels.
And events and MICE. I was at an event in Bangalore on Sunday, more than 185 people at the event. I'm going to be at the event at the at a prominent hotel in Delhi on Thursday. And we as a media company do 170 events. We're thinking of bringing out these physical events back in March. So I'm excited about that prospect.
Please send us a calendar. We'll be happy to take it.
Yes.
Away from the lightest side. I think.
I'm supporting your view. I think it will be back before October. It will be back before October.
I think on the F&B side, and I think Nikhil spoke about it a little earlier, we see a serious traction happening on the outlets, which is the restaurants and the bars. The challenge is more on the banquets and the conferencing on the MICE side, where there are restrictions on number of people that you can have. For example, in Maharashtra, the cap is still 50 people. Till that gets lifted, it's going to be very difficult to have large events. And we foresee that happening, if not in a month's time, maybe in 2 months' time at max. But when that opens up, it will bring MICE back with a vengeance.
Mandeep, you heard all the hoteliers, both operators and owners on the show. As a leading industry, watcher and somebody who advises the industry, what do you think are the structural changes that are happening in the hospitality industry, and what does the government need to do beyond what we've discussed in the first segment? Mandeep, Lamba?
Annurag, I think, Mr. Kachru spoke well about, what the industry is now seeing in terms of change. And I think if I pick up a statement that I read somewhere, that it is now more about copability than capability. It is coping with what has happened to us. I think there are some deep lessons. I think, the silver lining, if at all you can call it that, we didn't need a pandemic for any reason. But if there is a silver lining, and if we can talk about silver linings in this terrible mess that we're in, I think the industry has sat back and looked at its own performance metrics. I think we've been a very generous kind of industry. I think our costs were all over the place. We were not as conscious of our costs as we have now suddenly, become. And that, I think, is the single largest benefit that we're going to see. I think you spoke about, less with more. I think that's what it is. We're doing more with less people, right? And I think that's going to be a structural change. We are going to be looking at manpower ratios which are much lower than what we were ideally used to. And that's going to be a long-term change. I think there are going to be a lot of cost structures. Our capital structures are going to change. I think we're going to look at making hotels at lower costs. I think we're going to look at frugal luxury. I think we're going to probably start being more realistic about our spaces. I think we're going to be looking very, very seriously on ancillary revenue, something that the industry has missed out over the years, and what the airline industry has done so wonderfully. Can you imagine, Annurag, the other day I read, a message which came to me that if you want to check in at the counter for Indigo Airlines, you're going to have to pay extra. Right? Unbelievable. If I was to do this in the hotel, can you imagine what kind of structural change, mindset change that we will need? But that is, I think, where we need to head. I think we have very, very high capital costs. We have very high real estate costs. We need to start rethinking on how we leverage and how we monetize these areas. So don't be surprised if over a period of time, and I hope the industry gets around to doing it, is that we have similar sort of changes happening in our industry on ancillary charges. So if you want a room right next to the elevator, you're going to have to pay a little extra for it. And I don't see the reason why you shouldn't be, because we pay for everything extra on an airline, and we don't even bat an eyelid. So I think that's one of the structural changes that I am hoping to see in the industry, besides some long-term cost structure changes, both on the operating costs and in the long-term capital costs. I think designs are going to change. Technology is going to be very, very quickly adapted into hotels. A lot of I think the front desk as such, I think we can start writing an obituary on the front desk, because a lot of that is going to change. We really don't need so many people on the front desk, and it's a cost. So I think there is rethinking.
So are you suggesting that when I check into a hotel, I'll be talking to a bot?
Not necessarily, but you won't be seeing maybe one doorman, two guest relation executives, two people behind the concierge desk and three behind the reception. Unlikely that's going to happen.
Absolutely. The only thing I'd say, hope is not a plan. Hope is not a plan. And second is the fact that frugal luxury is oxymoronish. It's like, 10 years back you would say, luxury being mass. By definition, luxury can't be frugal or mass, but we live in abnormal times and we need to accept the realities. You're absolutely right about the fact that we tend to focus on the basics. Everything plus possibly needs to be paid by the customer, and there are segments that are unexplored which will become significant for operators. Mr. Khanna, you've been the last 6 odd years you've been looking at the industry, and you would talk to the hoteliers in April, and now in Jan 2021, when you talk to the same hoteliers, do you see a more hopeful bunch of leaders, and what is their kind of predictions for the future? What do they feel will happen over the next 6 months, 12 months? Because we know over the next 18 months, hospitality will be back to some semblance of past numbers. That's for a given, because business travel will be curtailed, but there are certain things which when we have a choice we'll do, which is travel and do face-to-face meeting. So tell us, where is the optimism of the hoteliers coming from, and what is the sense you get from them when you talk to them, Mr. Khanna?
First of all, let me just go to Mandeep. Mandeep, you're not building too many friends with the guests, so we're going to get into the hotels, right? By doing a parallel to what Indigo is doing. But having said that,
by the way, Mandeep, not many people pay for the fast forward. I can tell you, not many people pay for fast forward. Some do, but not many. Go on, Mr.
Let me tell you, Annurag, India is going to bounce back a lot sooner. Today, if you were to ask a hotelier to get into any show on Zoom or on a television channel, let me tell you, he's head down. I mean, he's deep into reviving his business. And they are encouraged. Things are happening. Let me tell you, gone were the days when a hotel, a typical large hotel in the Aerocity or Gurgaon or anywhere in Delhi was holding one wedding a day. They are holding 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 weddings a day. Weddings are happening. They may be smaller packages. There were times when I was speaking to a famous chef. I said, "Chef, क्या हो रहा है?" He said, "Sir, पहले लोग लड़ते थे कि यार रेट कम कर दे. Now they are saying कि यार रेट बढ़ा दे. खाना अच्छा होना चाहिए. लोग तो 20-25 ही आ रहे हैं, right? So people are not fighting for rates. So weddings are being planned. So there are critical drivers. There's MICE.
They're buying more gold.
There's international inbound. There's the domestic. And gold is on a high. So let me tell you, anybody today, people are going out because the ARR was low, the rates were low, so people are traveling. Now that's a great hook, right? Let the industry kickstart. वो पहले जमाने में होता था ना, स्कूटर को धक्का देते थे गाड़ी को, एक बार चल पड़ती थी, then it would drive. I think the industry is encouraged, they are seeing hope, and things are happening. And there's a lot of innovation happening. Who was, the hotels are going out to pick clothes for dry cleaning. They are delivering food. I mean, so would these people have ever thought of all this before the lockdown? No. So I think there's a lot happening. MICE is kickstarting, like I said.
Thank you so much. Sanjay, again, we know the abysmal number of tourists that anyway were coming to India. So they were giving us a lot of business. Now the Indian tourist becomes supreme. So when you build new properties, in terms of locations and places, what are the cities that you're looking to either acquire new properties or build new properties? Sanjay?
You're on mute, Sanjay.
Apologies. So as far as Chalet is concerned, Annurag, we were anyway looking at leisure as the natural expansion for us, even in the pre-COVID scenario. So we were exploring destinations like Goa and a couple of hill stations as our expansion plans. We'll continue to explore those. But at the same time, we also need to, I think what's going to happen primarily in the big, larger business hotels, MICE will become mainstay. And as time comes, as international travel starts, the individual travelers will start coming in. And they will probably migrate to larger hotels as against smaller hotels because of the safety from a hygiene perspective. New segments have developed over the last 10 months. New revenue streams have developed over the last 10 months. Mandeep touched upon it earlier. I think they'll become like the cream on the other regular revenues that we were getting, even when good old times are back. I'm very confident that FY23, that's the period from April 22 to March 23, the industry will be back to pre-COVID numbers. I'm very confident of that.
Yeah.
In fact, if you ask me 6 months back, what my view for the coming year was and what my view now is, I'm a lot more bullish than I was 6 months back. Just because I think the vaccination process globally has got preponed by almost 3 months from what we expected it to be. So that's going to improve things.
Yeah, it takes away the fear factor, because the one thing that was keeping people away from hotels or physical events or MICE was this fear factor. With the vaccine being rolled out and also the infection and mortality numbers going down over the last 2 weeks, I think it augurs well overall for India and of course in terms of the hospitality industry. Mr. Kachru, you can't be too happy. If the government sees you too happy, possibly you won't get too much from the government. So while Sanjay and Nikhil and Mandeep are optimistic because you're in a much better place than you were in April, so relatively you're doing well, but you still have a long way and to recover what you lost in the last 10 months. So I'll come back to you again and ask you, what do you think the government is likely to do? What are the low-hanging fruits that it can easily do and can help you grow? And that means extra tax revenue for the government and the economy doing well, the jobs coming back. So give us, what are the low-hanging fruits that can be easily done by the finance minister?
Anuragji, I'm wearing two hats here. One of the Hotel Association of India and Radisson Hotel South Asia. As far as we as an industry, I think, government actually needs to execute what they are saying. The problem is everybody is talking, sympathizing, and they are going ahead and saying, yeah, we know your pain, we can feel your pain, and we need to do something. Exhibition is all right, but I think it needs to be executed. Like Sanjay and Mandeep said, I think kudos to Maharashtra government. I mean, they actually implemented what they said. So I think the key issues, if you ask me today, what are our expectations from the budget? Well, there's something more than what we want from the government. It's not related directly to the budget. We want, as has been asked many times, Mandeep made this point earlier also, many white papers have been prepared on hoteliering being declared as tourism and hospitality be declared as
the industry status, because it has implications from a bank loan to all kinds of things.
It needs to be done. It needs to be, and there's a problem. Something is at central level, something is at state level. Now, this is a state subject. Certain areas have to be dealt with by different states. So it has to be implemented, and we're hopeful. Many states have already moved up and assured us, and they are preparing cabinet notes in this respect, and hopefully something would come up in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we'll see things happening. But As far as central government is concerned, Sanjay very correctly said that, the government has to look at restructuring of loans. I personally feel one-time structuring should be allowed. They have allowed moratorium, which is presently only till August. It needs to be extended till end of the year. Otherwise, end of the financial year, how will it help those people? You will have more and more NPAs. Not many people, will accept a situation when your 30 to 40% of your portfolios go off. But having said this, as an industry, I think as an operator and a brand, I think our major worry today is that our average rates, as Bhuvanesh pointed out, are really so low that it is very difficult to maintain cash flows properly. So while we see green shoots at many places, but at the key locations, it's a huge problem. And I think that needs to be addressed, and it can only be addressed as of today by domestic tourism. And if government doesn't really focus on domestic tourism, it will not happen. So my key submission to the government is please incentivize Indians to travel within India. I think that is most important. And look at LTC, what they have done. LTA can now be used even for FMCG products. I think we need to have policies where business companies, corporates allow their employees, and it's all tax deductible. So these are some of the issues we need to focus on.
Absolutely. The government, I would give credit to the government overall in terms of tackling Corona well, in terms of doing the lockdowns at the right time, whatever, in terms of, giving the stimulus to the economy and doing reforms at the same time. Keep in mind that we talk of healthcare infrastructure of the UK and the US as the gold standards. They all saw pressure on them and couldn't handle it. Also, there were no food rights in India. In the US, there were food rights in certain cities. So clearly, in terms of the social fabric being kept together by catering to the bottom of the pyramid and to the middle belly of India, in terms of making sure they got free food, the government made sure that the most disadvantaged sections were looked after. Let me ask you now a question that possibly will inspire our viewers and give them some peek into your mind and how you operate. Lockdown has been time for introspection, for going within. It has in some way changed the way we think. It has questioned some of our beliefs, and we've all added new ways of thinking and new ways of being. So I would like to know from each one of you, what are your top lockdown lessons? Let me start with Nikhil first. Nikhil, what are your top lockdown lessons?
Annurag, one thing that has changed from the business perspective is the whole labor arbitrage. And I think that's a one-time reset that the industry has had. And that has changes on all of us, right? And none of us will see the same numbers coming back to the hotels, good, bad, or ugly. And that's something that we need to be conscious of and try and help those team members who are no longer in hospitality. I think from that personally, I've become a lot more humble and humility, and that's something that have been my biggest lessons in the lockdown.
Okay, Mandeep, Lamba, your top lockdown lessons.
I think my biggest lockdown lesson is that WFH or work from home sucks, and I think it is just grossly overrated. I think the whole pleasure of going to work, interacting with everybody is something that we thrive on. So I think this work from home just is something that at least I could not come to terms with. I missed going to office, so that was one of my biggest lessons. And in keeping with that, I think the whole fabric of the way we are built, social people, staying away and sort of being confined to the walls of your own home was something which made me rather uncomfortable as time passed. But on the positive side, I think, like you said, a lot of introspection. So I got, time to do a lot of reading, spend a lot of time with family, and we had conversations, that we've never had before. And these were really nice. They were very meaningful. They threw open insights into family, into children that we had probably missed. So I think on a personal note, the me time and the us time with family was fabulous, and with friends on long distance calls. But on the flip side, I think both work from home and the inability of being able to go and just meet people and, those hugs that we are used to, and the handshakes that we are used to was something that I terribly missed.
I agree with you. Work from anywhere. I mean, whether it's a co-working space or an office or a home or a hotel room, it is functional, but it is not the same. And I would say the productivity of not everyone is high. And from an experience and from a social connect standpoint, it's very weak. Sanjay, your top lockdown lesson.
Well, I think, first I want to just add a view to what Mandeep just said. And I agree with him, the work from home doesn't really is a challenge. It doesn't work as well it should. Give me a second. I'm on sensor light saving costs, and that brings the lights back. So what I was saying was, there are casualties of work from home, and some of them have actually been documented and given as research reports. And the last one that came up is a big surprise for me, the trust deficit that's being created amongst colleagues is a crazy challenge. I never expected that to happen, but that's the latest analysis that's come out at a global level, and which is quite worrying actually. And there are others also. I'll not go into the deep of those. But I think the learning was the following. Number one, stay nimble. Number two, if you innovate and you push against the wall, you'll find solutions. We found the solutions along the way. And very importantly, stay very close to your talent pool. Especially when you can't physically meet up with them, it's important to meet up at least virtually with them on a day-to-day basis. Finally, I do want to add on work from home perspective. I think we need to segregate work from home and travel for work as two distinct and different, issues. People still need to travel for work, whether it's to meet your clients, whether it's to meet your sales teams, incentivize them, do the reviews.
And people who are in manufacturing.
And manufacturing, right? So you can't do that work from home as work from home. We need to differentiate that. The latest analysis that has been thrown up in a global meet just 2 days back, when I was attending it, is that 66%, is 2/3 of the global population now wants to come back to office. 1/3 of it thinks it's convenient to continue working from home. But at some point of time, if 66% does come back, the rest will have to come back.
Okay.
We have last 2 minutes on the show,
yes.
Annurag.
Mr. Kachru and Mr. Khanna, your top lockdown lessons.
I think basically my colleagues have already said what it is, but we have to do more with less. I think that's the summing of it. Since there are only 2 minutes, I like Bhuvanesh to give his words of wisdom.
Mr. Khanna?
I'm hardly the one.
I can clearly say.
Give it to Khanna, but having said that, let me tell you one thing.
Mr. Khanna, your top lockdown lesson, let me share, it's to save money by not shaving every day. That's the first top lockdown lesson. That's Mr. Khanna will share.
But Annurag, I just want to make one quick point.
The biggest lesson is
one quick point I want to make is how pleasantly amazed I was at how people reacted to each other and how industry reacted to the needs of this pandemic. And I think our industry established that we are there for everybody, we are human, and we have done whatever we could, whether they were frontline workers or whether they were own colleagues or there were people who were not right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Khanna.
All right, so the bigger one is that online is real, it's here to stay, right? The world has moved from just print to online. We to reach people who we will not have been able to gather on. So if you're not on one stage, you're on one screen, right? It's a happy place. People live, they've helped each other, they've held hands. Having said that, I just want to say, all the 4 people that you see on the screen over here are big names. KB Kachru sir, while he is the chairman of the Hotel Association of India, he is also the chairman Emeritus the Radisson Group. Mandeep, long-term vice president, and Mandeep, of course, is HVS, which is the big name in consulting. He is one of the biggest hospitality assets owner, Rahejas, JW, Mumbai, and whatnot, Renaissance. And Wyndham, of course, owns the Ramada brand the world over. And they're all bright hoteliers. I think we continue this hospitality dialogue, Annurag, and try and reach our word to the powers that.
Yeah, I know. I can see Gauri's body language. She moves. But Gauri, I know you started anchoring during the pandemic. So I want to ask you, what is your top lockdown lessons? I watch NewsX, so I know that you, a couple of months back, I started seeing you anchor. So what's been your top lockdown lesson?
My top lockdown lesson, of course, Annurag, has been that adapting is everything. I think I learned that the hard way, but it was very interesting. It was a very steep learning curve, but we adapted so quickly, so effectively. And I'm listening to you all, talk about such big challenges you all faced in your industry, but for me, it was at a smaller scale perhaps, but adapting and quickly just, adapting to a new challenge and just taking it up as quickly as possible is what I learned. A riveting conversation, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Annurag, for curating it throughout. It was very interesting to hear. A very challenging few months it has been, particularly for your industry. We will keep, of course, having these conversations here at NewsX. We continue to have these every day at 6 p.m. Thanks for watching.